He won't even see you, little shadow. The voice, honey-sweet and sharp as broken glass, cut through the peace of the garden. Her garden. And just like that, everything changed. Nemera's fingers froze around the stem of a moon-petal flower, its white petals so perfect, so fragile. Her breath caught. Deep down, she knew the truth. Thalira's words were meant to be a poison dart, and it had found its mark. She didn't know what scared her more, the coldness in her sister's tone, or the fact that she might be right. Her sister, Thalira, stood near the ancient stone bench, a queen holding court with her two giggling friends. They were like polished stones, smooth and hard and beautiful, while Nemera felt like a wildflower. Easily overlooked, easily crushed. To make things worse, Thalira's laughter echoed, a sound that once brought joy, but now only sounded like a threat. "The Alpha needs a Luna of fire and strength," Thalira declared, striking a pose. Her crimson dress was a shout against the garden's gentle green whisper. Someone to stand beside him, not hide behind him. Can you imagine her trying to command a council meeting? The friends giggled again. "They'd fall asleep before she finished her first sentence," one of them chirped. Nemera's chest ached. She tried to make herself smaller, to blend in with the leaves and the shadows, a skill she had perfected over a lifetime. No matter how hard she tried, she could never escape the feeling of being second best, an afterthought in her own home. Her goal, for this moment, for this whole week, was simple. Survive. Survive the endless talk of the claiming ceremony, survive the pitying looks, and survive her sister's casual cruelty. Instead, she was here, listening to her own eulogy. More importantly, she knew Thalira was performing for an audience of 3, but the words were aimed at an audience of 1. Every syllable was a stone thrown at Nemera's heart. Thalira continued, her voice dripping with false concern. "I do worry for her. What will become of her when I'm gone? When I'm Luna of the Valor Pack?" As if pulled by a string, Nemera watched as Thalira walked towards her. Her sister's scent, sharp cranberry and ambition, overwhelmed the gentle perfume of the moon petals. Before she could move, Thalira reached down and plucked the perfect flower Nemera had been tending for weeks. She held it up to the light, a perfect, beautiful thing. "See?" Thalira said softly, her voice a dangerous purr. "So pretty, so delicate." And then, without another word, she crushed it. The petals, bruised and broken, fell from her fingers onto the dirt. A tiny, pointless death. The moment their eyes locked, Nemera saw the truth. This wasn't just ambition. It was something darker, something possessive and cruel. Thalira smiled, a perfect, blood-red curve. "Don't worry, little shadow. I'll be sure to send for you, once I'm settled in." As she and her friends swept away, their laughter trailing behind them, Nemera knelt in the dirt. Her world tilted. She stared at the ruined flower, her thoughts spinning. That night, she would dream of a great black wolf with golden eyes, watching her from the edge of a dark, dark forest.
The scent of ink and old parchment filled the study. It was a smell of duty, of power, of problems that needed solving. And Ryden Valor, Alpha of the Valor Pack, had problems. He leaned over a massive oak table, his fingers tracing the border of his territory on a worn map. The Black River Pack was pushing their patrols closer to the southern ridge again. It was a test, a deliberate poke at a sleeping bear. So, he had to be ready. He had to be 10 steps ahead. Always. Because of that, there was no room for distraction. Yet, a distraction was exactly what the entire world was screaming about. "Alpha?" Ryden didn't look up. He knew that voice. Kyle, his beta, loyal as a brother, but sometimes as subtle as a charging rhino. "What is it, Kale?" "It's about the claiming ceremony tomorrow." A low growl rose in his throat before he could stop it. There it was, the distraction. The one problem he couldn't solve with a map or a show of force. the one that made his wolf pace restlessly beneath his skin. Truth be told, he hated it. He hated the political theater, the parade of ambitious daughters from every allied pack, their scents cloying and their smiles sharpened like knives. They didn't see him. They saw a title, a crown. "What about it?" he finally asked, his voice flat. He straightened up, turning to face his beta. Kyle was broad and steady, a rock of a man, but even he looked tense. "The elders are concerned. Lord Volkov has sent another gift for you. His daughter Syra is expecting a private audience." Ryden ran a hand through his dark hair. "A private audience she will not be getting. Send the gift back." Ryden, her father controls the northern trade routes. An alliance with him would put a viper in my bed. Ryden snapped, his voice echoing in the quiet room. The air thickened. He saw Kale flinch but didn't care. In fact, he needed Kale to understand. "My father made a political match, Kale. Do you remember the years of cold silence in this keep? The misery that followed him like a shadow? He did his duty and it hollowed him out. I will not make that same mistake. That's why this was so important. The claiming wasn't a contract to him. It was supposed to be sacred. A fated call of one soul to another, a bond forged by the moon goddess herself. At least that's what the lore claimed. Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was just a fairy tale told to wolves to make them feel special. He didn't know, but he held on to the hope of it. His goal wasn't to find a convenient queen. It was to find his other half. Still, the pressure was immense. His pack needed a Luna. It needed the stability that came from a mated alpha. He felt the weight of it, a physical pressure on his chest. With every heartbeat, the ceremony grew closer. He walked to the window, staring out at the vast forest that was his home, his kingdom. "The moon will choose," he said, his voice quiet now. "I just hope I'm strong enough to listen." The unspoken part hung in the air between them, and strong enough to deal with the fallout if she chooses someone inconvenient.
The room smelled of burned hair and desperation. Thalira sat before a gilded mirror, a scowl on her perfect face as a servant tried to tame a rebellious curl. Nymera stood by the wardrobe, her arms filled with silks and velvets, feeling less like a sister and more like a silent, unpaid servant. Her goal was to simply get through the afternoon without her sister noticing her enough to throw another insult, which meant she was failing miserably. "No, you useless girl. Not that one," Thalira snapped, pointing at a deep blue dress Nymera was holding. "That color will wash me out under the moonlight. I need the silver one, the one that looks like it was spun from the stars themselves." Nymera dutifully swapped the dresses, her own simple gray dress feeling coarse and plain in comparison. Maybe it was fate that she was born to be the drab moth to Thalira's vibrant butterfly. Even so, she couldn't shake the memory of the crushed flower. It felt like a warning. "Are you even listening to me?" Thalira's voice cut through her thoughts. "Yes, the silver one," Nymera murmured, laying it carefully on the bed. Thalira stood, dismissing the servant with a wave of her hand. She prowled the room, a caged lioness before a hunt. Her energy was a crackling fire, and Nymera felt like a piece of dry kindling, ready to catch a spark. What followed was a long, rambling speech about how the Alpha would see her, how he couldn't possibly resist her, how their children would be the strongest in the pack's history. It was a fantasy she had been spinning for years. "He is the most powerful Alpha in 3 territories, Nymera. Power must be matched with power, with beauty, with ambition." She stopped in front of her sister, her eyes scanning Nymera from head to toe with open disdain. "He needs a queen, not a gardener." Her chest ached, a familiar dull pain. "I like the garden," she whispered. "Of course you do," Thalira scoffed. "It's quiet, it's safe. You can hide there from the real world, but some of us are meant for more than hiding." In that moment, a strange question bubbled up inside Nymera. What if she wasn't hiding? What if she was just waiting? Waiting for what? She didn't know. But the thought was a tiny seed of rebellion planted in the barren soil of her self-doubt. Before she could examine it, Thalira grabbed her arm, her nails digging in slightly. "Just do one thing for me tomorrow, little shadow," she hissed, her voice low and intense. "Stay in the back. Don't draw attention. Don't ruin this for me. For our family." As the silence stretched, Nymera could only nod. Deep down, she knew the truth. Her sister didn't see her as family. She saw her as an obstacle, a potential embarrassment to be managed. As Thalira finally turned away, satisfied with her surrender, Nymera's hand drifted to a small, hidden pocket in her dress, where she'd tucked a single, uncrushed moon petal. A tiny piece of defiance no one else could see.
On the other hand, Raiden stood on the great stone balcony of the Alpha's keep, a biting wind whipping at his hair. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in brutal strokes of orange and purple. The beauty of it was lost on him. All he felt was the closing in of time. Soon after he'd dismissed Kale, the pressure had only grown, a living thing coiling in his gut. "You look like a man about to face a firing squad, not a room full of beautiful women." Kale's voice was dry. He had come back, this time holding 2 goblets of dark spiced ale. He handed one to Raiden. "I'd rather face the firing squad," Raiden muttered, taking a long drink. The ale did nothing to warm the cold knot in his stomach. "At least that's an honest fight." "It's one night, Raiden." "It's the rest of my life," he countered, his voice low. "It's the future of this pack. You heard the list? Sira Volkov. Her father is a snake and she's his favorite fang. Ilara Thorn, so ambitious she'd probably try to poison me in my sleep to take my title. And the Kaelwyn sisters." He paused. "Thalira Kaelwyn is said to be a great beauty," Kale offered, "and their family holds significant influence over the Eastern Territories. It would be a strong match." Raiden grunted. He'd seen Thalira Kaelwyn at a winter summit once. Beautiful, yes. But her eyes, they were hungry. He'd seen that same hunger in too many others. It was the hunger for power, and it always soured whatever it touched. What's worse, he knew his council, the elders. They would all push for a match like that. They valued strength and strategy over everything else. Because of that, they couldn't understand his hesitation. He drained his goblet, the silence stretching between them, comfortable and familiar. They had grown up together, trained together, fought back to back. Kyle was the only one he could be this honest with. "My father's mate, my own mother. She wasn't a bad person," Raiden said suddenly, his voice rough. He stared out at the darkening forest. "She was just wrong for him. The alliance was good for the pack, but it broke his spirit. He used to laugh, Kale, a big, booming laugh that could shake the windows. After she came, the laughter died. The silence in this keep, it was a living thing, a cold, heavy blanket over everything. He wouldn't let that happen again. He couldn't. "You are not your father," Kale said softly. "Your fate is your own." "Is it?" Raiden asked, the question directed at the wind, at the moon that was just beginning to rise. "Or is it all just a series of traps we're expected to walk into for the sake of duty?" He felt his wolf stir, a primal, restless energy. It didn't care about trade routes or alliances. It cared about something else. Something it could feel on the edge of the wind, a scent it couldn't quite place, a call it couldn't yet understand, a promise. In the span of a breath, he felt a strange pull, a flicker of warmth in the cold dread, a feeling of anticipation, as if his soul was leaning forward, listening for a sound only it could hear.
That night, sleep was a distant shore she couldn't reach. The moon was a perfect silver coin in the black velvet sky, and it seemed to pour its light directly into her window, directly into her soul. Her body moved on instinct, carrying her from her bed to the cold stone of the windowsill. She pressed her forehead against the glass, the coolness a relief against her racing pulse. Her thoughts spun, a whirlwind of Thalira's cruel words and the impossible, terrifying hope of the claiming. She should be rooting for her sister. A part of her was. A Kelwyn as Luna would elevate their family, secure their future. It was the logical, selfless thing to want. But deep down, something inside her shifted. A selfish, wild little thing in her heart whispered, "What about you?" With every heartbeat, a strange energy seemed to pulse in the air. It wasn't just nerves, it was something else. As if the world was holding its breath, waiting. She felt it, clear as day, a thrumming beneath her skin, a call echoing in the marrow of her bones. A faint, tingling sensation started at the base of her neck, a place she'd seen marked on mated she-wolves in old drawings. She rubbed the spot, a shiver tracing its way down her spine. "It's just your imagination," she told herself. Nerves, fear, hope. A dangerous cocktail that was making her feel things that weren't real. But then, the door creaked open. Thalira stood in the doorway, already dressed in a shimmering silver robe, her face a mask of cold focus. "You're still awake," she stated. It wasn't a question. "I couldn't sleep," Namira whispered. Thalira glided into the room, her movements sleek and predatory. "Good. Stay awake and pray to the goddess for me. Pray that she gives the Alpha clear eyes to see what he needs." She stopped before the window, looking out at the same moon Namira was watching. "Tomorrow, everything changes." "Thalira?" Namira started, not even sure what she wanted to say. "Be kind. Be careful. Don't break." Her sister turned, and in the moonlight, her beauty was terrifying. "What?" "Nothing." Her voice trembled. Thalira's eyes narrowed. "You feel it too, don't you? The magic in the air. The power." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "Don't mistake it for your own little sister. That's my destiny calling. Don't you dare try to answer it." Without another word, she was gone, leaving Namira alone with the roaring silence and the weight of the moon. Her instincts surged, and for the first time in her life, she didn't push them down. She let the feeling wash over her, the strange, wild hope, the terrifying sense that her sister was wrong. As the wind shifted, she could almost smell it, the scent of pine, of winter, of a storm about to break. A scent she had never known, but that her soul recognized instantly.
Sleep offered no escape. Ryden lay in his massive bed, the furs doing nothing to warm the chill that had settled deep in his bones. The keep was silent, the silence of a held breath before a plunge. But his wolf was not silent. It paced the cage of his ribs, a massive, restless beast, its golden eyes fixed on something he couldn't see. Eventually he gave up. He rose, pulling on a pair of dark pants, and walked barefoot onto the cold stone of his private balcony. The same moon that was tormenting a quiet girl miles away was staring down at him, a silent, knowing observer. It felt like a judgment. He gripped the stone balustrade, his knuckles white. The wind carried 1,000 scents. The damp earth of the forest floor, the sharp tang of pine, the distant smell of wood smoke from the village. But underneath it all, his wolf was hunting for something else. A scent that was impossibly faint, almost not there at all, but one that made every nerve in his body stand on end. Moon petals and quiet strength. The thought came out of nowhere, nonsensical and vivid. Where had it come from? He shook his head, trying to clear it. To make things worse, a feeling of intense longing washed over him, so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. It was a hollow ache in his chest, a desperate need for a person he had never met, a face he had never seen. Was this the fated bond the old ones spoke of? This agonizing, maddening pull towards an unknown? Or was he finally losing his mind from the pressure of it all? Beneath the moonlight, he let out a long, slow breath. His gaze swept over the sleeping lands he was sworn to protect. He had to be strong for them. He had to be a wise alpha, a calm leader. But in this moment he was just a man, a wolf, being torn in two by duty and a desperate, nameless hope. He didn't know how long he stood there, a statue carved from shadow and moonlight. The tension broke only when he heard the first stirrings of the dawn patrol far below. Come morning, his fate would be decided, his world tilted, and for the first time, instead of dread, he felt a sliver of something else, excitement. As if the forest watched, as if the moon whispered, he felt a certainty settle in his soul. Something was coming, and just like that, everything was about to change.
The great hall was a sea of wolves stuffed into fine clothes, and Nymeria was drowning. She stood in the shadows at the very back, just as Thalira had commanded, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. 100 different scents, perfume, roasting meats, nervous sweat, clogged the air, making her feel dizzy. More importantly, a river of moonlight poured through the high, arched windows, pooling around the Alpha's throne like sacred water. It was all so grand, so overwhelming. Her simple dress felt like a whisper in a room full of shouts. Her goal was to be a ghost, a phantom, to watch her sister's destiny unfold and then slip away unnoticed. But then, Alpha Ryden Vaylor stood. As if fate demanded it, a hush fell over the entire hall. He was a predator in fine-tailored black, a king surveying his domain. Tall, broad-shouldered. His dark hair was a bit wild, and his eyes, even from across the room, she could feel them. They swept over the crowd, over the hopeful, painted faces of the she-wolves in the front row, over her sister's brilliant, confident smile. For a second, his gaze passed over her, and her heart skipped. It was nothing. A brief glance. Still, her wolf stirred. A tiny, sleepy thing inside her that rarely made a peep suddenly lifted its head. He started to move. He walked down from the dais, his steps silent and sure. He bypassed Syra Volkov. He walked right past Alara Thorne. His eyes were scanning, hunting. He was getting closer. The space between them seemed to shrink, to burn. He was walking past Thalira. Thalira. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Her thoughts spun. This wasn't right. This wasn't the plan. And then he stopped. His head turned. The moment their eyes locked, the world fell away. The noise, the people, the suffocating sense, gone. There was only him. His eyes were the color of molten gold, and they weren't just looking at her. They were looking into her. They saw the frightened girl, the quiet gardener, the hidden dreamer. He saw all of it, and he didn't look away. Her breath caught. Time stood still. He started walking again, towards her. With every step he took, the bond she'd felt a whisper of last night roared to life. It was a physical pull, a golden rope tying her soul to his. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He stopped right in front of her. The scent of pine and winter storms washed over her, and her bones remembered him. He was so close. Close enough to see the silver flecks in his golden eyes, close enough for his shadow to swallow her whole. Without another word, he reached out and gently took her hand. A shock, hot and electric, shot up her arm. As her pulse raced, he turned to the stunned, silent hall. His voice was a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the floor, through her very soul. "She is the one," he declared. "My mate." And just like that, everything changed.
The ceremony began, and the hunt was on. Ryden stood, the weight of 1,000 expectations on his shoulders. He could feel the eyes of the elders, the hopeful stares of the visiting lords, the hungry ambition of the she-wolves gathered below. They wanted a show, a political maneuver. Instead, he planned to give them the truth. His wolf pressed forward, a restless power just beneath his skin. It wasn't interested in the preening peacocks in the front row. Its head was up, scenting the air, searching. "Find her," it snarled in his mind. "Find ours." He descended the steps, his movements fluid. His eyes scanned the crowd, a quick, dismissive inventory. Volkov's daughter, Sira, offered a predatory smile. He felt nothing. Thorn's girl, Ilara, looked at him as if he were a prize to be won. His wolf sneered. He saw the Kaelwyn beauty, Thalira, positioned perfectly in the moonlight. She was stunning, a masterpiece of fire and confidence. And his soul felt absolutely nothing. A cold, blank void. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to sink its claws into him. What if she wasn't here? What if the feeling from last night was just a phantom, a desperate hope? But then his wolf caught it. A scent, faint, almost buried under the cacophony of perfumes, moon petals, and something else, something like quiet earth after a gentle rain, a scent of peace, a scent of home. As if summoned, his eyes were pulled to the back of the hall, to the shadows, and he saw her. She was trying to hide, to make herself small, but the moonlight seemed to find her anyway. She wasn't dressed in flashy silks or dripping with jewels. She was just her, and she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The moment their eyes met, it was like a lightning strike, a jolt of pure recognition that shook him to his core. There, his wolf roared in triumph. There she is. Ours. The bond slammed into place, a physical force that nearly staggered him. It was real. The stories, the lore, the hope he'd clung to. It was all real. He didn't even notice the gasps as he walked past the others. His world had narrowed to a single point. To her. He reached her, this beautiful creature of moonlight and shadows. As he took her hand, the connection surged, a current of pure energy that sealed the claim. Her pulse was a frantic bird beneath his thumb. In that moment, he knew he would burn the world down to keep her safe. He turned to his stunned pack. His voice was laced with the possessive power of his alpha wolf, leaving no room for doubt, no room for argument. "She is the one," he announced. The words were a vow, a promise. "My mate." Her world tilted, and so did his. They were two halves of a whole, finally found. The moments after the claiming were a blur, a dream. Servants had whisked her away to a lavish guest chamber, a room bigger than the entire downstairs of her own home. She sat on the edge of a silk-draped bed, her hand still tingling where the alpha had touched it. The bond was a warm, humming thing in her chest. It felt like hope. It felt like she had finally been seen. Her goal was to just breathe, to understand the impossible thing that had just happened. But then, the heavy oak door slammed open, and the dream became a nightmare. Thalira stood there, her face a terrifying mask of fury. Her beautiful silver dress was a wrinkled mess, and her eyes were burning. The air thickened, charged with a hatred so potent Namera could taste it. "You," Thalira hissed. The word was a poison dart. "You did this. You planned this. You stole him from me." Namera shot to her feet. "No, I didn't. I would never. Liar." Thalira strode into the room, her movements jerky with rage. "You've always been like this. Quiet, sneaky, playing the victim, the poor little shadow, while you plot and you wait." What followed was a tirade of accusations, each one more wild, more painful than the last. She accused Nymera of using dark magic, of bewitching the Alpha, of deliberately trying to ruin her life. "That's not true," Nymera's voice trembled. "Isn't it?" Thalira sneered, getting closer. The scent of her fury was sharp and sour. "Well, it doesn't matter, because you are not strong enough to keep him. You are a weak, timid little mouse, and he is a wolf. He will break you." Her chest ached. Maybe her sister was right. What did she know of being a Luna? How could she possibly be the mate to an Alpha that powerful? Doubt, cold and familiar, began to seep back in, chilling the warmth of the bond. Then, Thalira's expression shifted. The rage cooled into something far more frightening, a cold, calculating cunning. But don't worry, sister. I'm not going to let you ruin our family's chance. I am going to fix your mistake." Before she could move, Thalira pulled something from a hidden pocket, a small, intricately carved wooden box. She opened it. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was a small pouch of dried, dark-looking herbs and a veil, a claiming veil, identical to the one Nymera was supposed to wear for the first meeting. Nymera's blood ran cold. "What is that?" "This," Thalira said, her voice a triumphant whisper, "is my destiny. These are forbidden herbs, little sister. They can mask a true scent, muddle a new bond, just for a little while, just long enough." "No, Thalira, you can't." "I can," she said, her smile sharp and cruel. "He chose you. He claimed you. But I will be the one who meets him tonight. I will be the one he bonds with, and you? You will stay here. You will be the sad, sick sister overcome with shock, too ill to see anyone." Without warning, Thalira shoved her. Nymera stumbled backward, landing hard on the bed. Before either could speak, Thalira was at the door. "He will have the mate he deserves," she said, her hand on the heavy iron lock. "A queen of fire, not a shadow from a garden." The lock clicked shut, and Nymera was plunged into a terrified silence, a prisoner of her own impossible destiny. Meanwhile, in the Alpha's council chamber, the mood was just as venomous. Ryden stood before the hearth, the firelight casting flickering shadows on the stone walls. Across from him stood 3 of his pack's most powerful elders, their faces grim. His beta, Kale, stood by his side, a silent pillar of support. "You have chosen the wrong sister," Elder Goran snarled, his voice a gravelly rumble. He was an old wolf, scarred and stubborn, and he did not like being surprised. "I have chosen my mate," Ryden said, his voice dangerously calm. He would not let them see any doubt. He had to be strong, because his pack's stability depended on him showing absolute certainty. "The shadow," another elder, Lyra, scoffed. "She has no training, no political acumen. Thalira Kelwyn has been groomed to be a Luna since birth. She is the asset. Her sister is a nobody." Ryden's wolf bristled at the insult. A low, warning growl rumbled in his chest. "That nobody is your future, Luna, and you will show her respect." "Respect must be earned, Alpha," Goran shot back. "This is a reckless, emotional choice. It destabilizes our alliance with the Kelwyns and makes you look weak, impulsive. What were you thinking?" His goal was to shut this down, quickly and decisively. "I was thinking that I will not chain myself to a viper for political gain," he said, his golden eyes flashing. "I was thinking that I will trust the goddess who chose my mate for me. My decision is final." He let the silence hang in the air, a testament to his authority. Truth be told, he knew they had a point. Logically, Thalira was the better choice, the stronger choice. But the bond was not logical. It was a primal, undeniable truth, and he would not, could not, defy it. Kale finally spoke, his voice calm and steady. "The Alpha has made his claim. The bond is sealed. It is our duty to support our Alpha and welcome our new Luna." The elders exchanged dark looks, but they knew they were beaten. An Alpha's claim, once made, was sacred. To defy it was to defy the goddess herself. As a result, they could do nothing but offer stiff, reluctant bows. "As you wish, Alpha," Goran muttered, his displeasure radiating off him in waves. As they left, Kale turned to him. "This will not be easy. They will test her. Then she will have to prove she is stronger than they think," Ryden said, though a flicker of unease went through him. He thought of her, so quiet and gentle in the chaos of the hall. Was she strong enough? He pushed the thought away. She was his mate. Which meant she had a core of steel, whether she knew it yet or not. He would help her find it. But first, he had to finally meet her. The thought sent a jolt of raw anticipation through him, chasing away the political chill. He was going to his den to the woman his soul had recognized, and nothing else mattered.
Panic was a living creature clawing at her throat. Nimera threw herself against the heavy door, her fists beating against the unyielding wood until her knuckles were raw. "Let me out! Please! Someone!" Her voice was swallowed by the thick stone walls. The silence that answered was a crushing weight. She was trapped. Utterly and completely trapped. She backed away, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her eyes darted around the opulent prison. The windows were too high, the walls too smooth. There was no escape. She could feel the bond, that golden cord connecting her to him, and it was pulsing with a confused, anxious energy. His energy. He was waiting for her. And in her place, a lie was walking down the hall. A lie wearing her face and her destiny. Her body moved on instinct. She searched the room, her desperation making her frantic. A loose floorboard? A secret passage? It was useless. The keep was built to withstand sieges, not to allow for the escape of a terrified girl. What's worse, a horrible thought crept in. What if Thalira was right? What if he was disappointed by the real her? What if, after meeting the fiery, confident version her sister was pretending to be, he found the real Nimera lacking? Her knees gave out, and she slid to the floor, her back against the cold door. Tears streamed down her face, hot and silent. Deep down, she knew the truth. She had been given a miracle, a destiny she'd never dared to dream of, and in the span of a breath, it had been stolen. Not by an enemy, not by a monster, but by her own blood. She closed her eyes, focusing on the thrum of the bond. It was all she had left of him, a fragile connection across the distance, a silent scream for help that she knew he couldn't hear. She heard footsteps fade down the long stone corridor outside her door. Thalira's footsteps, walking towards him. And she let out a sob, a sound of pure, hopeless despair.
The fire in the hearth of his den crackled, casting a warm golden glow on the room. Furs were draped over heavy leather chairs, and a decanter of amber-colored liquor sat waiting. The room was a sanctuary, his sanctuary, and tonight, he would finally share it. He paced before the fire, the restless energy of his wolf making it impossible to sit still. He had dismissed his guards. He wanted this first meeting to be private, with no prying eyes, just him and his mate. He felt the bond, a steady warm hum in his soul. It was waiting just as he was, eager, expectant. He thought of her eyes, the way she had looked at him with such shock and wonder. He couldn't wait to hear her voice, to learn her thoughts, to simply be with her. A soft knock came at the door. "Come in," he said, his voice deeper than usual. The door opened, and she entered. She was wearing the traditional claiming veil, a delicate silver lace that obscured her features as was custom. She moved with a practiced grace, her head held high. Something was off. As she came closer, his wolf, which should have been purring in contentment, instead let out a low, confused growl in the back of his mind. He pushed the feeling down. It was just nerves, his own and hers. This was an overwhelming situation. "You can remove the veil," he said softly. She hesitated for a beat too long. "The custom says the alpha must be the one to remove it," she replied. Her voice was right, but the tone, it was too bold, too polished. He walked toward her. The air between them, which should have been crackling with the energy of their new bond, felt static, empty. He reached for her, his fingers brushing the edge of the silver lace. With his scent in the air, he took a slow breath, trying to find that beautiful, gentle scent of moon petals and rain-washed earth. Instead, he smelled the cloying aroma of claiming herbs, a scent designed to heighten the senses, but underneath it, there was something else. Cranberries and something sharp, something wrong. The space between them burned, not with passion but with a jarring, discordant wrongness. His wolf snarled, a clear warning this time. Not her, not ours. The moment his fingers touched the veil, he felt it. A cold, dead void where the soul-deep spark of recognition should have been. Her breath caught, but it wasn't the gasp of a nervous mate. It was the sound of a liar afraid of being caught. His hand froze, inches from her face. And in the quiet that followed, a single, terrifying question echoed in his mind. "Who are you?" The silence roared. His hand was frozen inches from the veil, and his question, "Who are you?" hung in the air between them, a blade ready to fall. His wolf was a storm of fury and confusion in his chest, snarling one word over and over. Wrong, wrong, wrong. The woman before him, his supposed mate, didn't answer. Instead, her body moved on instinct, the instinct of a cornered animal. She gave a little gasp, her hand flying to her forehead. "Alpha, I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice suddenly frail. Her body swayed. "You are your power. It's too much." And then she crumpled, a graceful, theatrical feint right into his arms. His body reacted before his mind could, catching her easily. The contact was a jolt of ice water. There was no spark, no warmth, no hum of the bond. There was nothing but the weight of a stranger in his arms. Still, he was trapped. In his own den, with servants just outside the door, what could he do? Accuse his new mate of being an imposter seconds after their first meeting? They would think he was insane. He lifted her, her body feeling strangely light, and carried her to a fur-draped chaise. Moments later she stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Forgive me, Alpha," she whispered, not looking at him. "The shock of the claiming, and then to be in your presence. I was overcome. Please allow me to keep the veil for now. I feel so exposed." Her excuse was perfect. Too perfect. Because of that, it did nothing to soothe the raging suspicion in his soul. But he was the Alpha, and he had to play the part. So, he nodded, his face a mask of stone. "Rest," was all he said before turning and walking out, the lie she had built settling like a shroud over his sanctuary. Come morning, the farce continued. They sat at opposite ends of a long, polished table for their first formal meal. Servants moved like ghosts around them. He watched her, this woman who wore his mate's name. She was a flawless actress, he'd give her that. "I was surprised by your choice," he began, his voice deceptively casual. "I'm told your sister Thalira was the one everyone expected me to claim." She gave a delicate shrug. "My sister enjoys the spotlight. I prefer the quiet." The answer was good. Vague. Safe. But he wouldn't let her stay in safe waters. "My guards mentioned your family keeps a beautiful garden. I noticed some rare moon petals there during the ceremony. They only bloom in very specific soil. What is the secret to keeping them so vibrant?" As the silence stretched, he saw the flicker of panic in her eyes before she hid it. She didn't know. Her world tilted, just for a second, and he saw it. "Oh, the gardeners handle all of that," she said with a breezy laugh. "I just enjoy their beauty." His wolf sneered. The real she-wolf he'd chosen, the one who smelled of those very flowers, would have known the answer. Deep down, he knew the truth. This was not her. But a horrifying new question was beginning to form. If this woman was a lie, where was the truth? Where? Darkness, silence, despair. That was her world now. Nimera lay curled on the cold floor of her prison, the warmth of the bond the only thing left to her. It was a faint, confusing pulse now, a distant star she could barely see. But it was there, and it was filled with doubt. His doubt. He knew. He didn't know how he knew, but he sensed the lie. And just like that, everything changed. Hope, fierce and desperate, bloomed beneath her skin. He hadn't been fooled. She sat up, the tears drying on her face. Her goal was no longer to cry, or to wait for a rescue that would never come. Her goal was to fight. No matter how hard she tried to be the victim her sister wanted her to be, a different instinct was taking over. the instinct to survive. Her eyes scanned the room, not as a prison, but as a puzzle. The door was impossible, a slab of solid oak with an iron lock. The windows were high, narrow slits in the stone. But then she saw it. A small square hatch low on the door for passing through food trays. It was barred, of course, but the hinges, they were old, rusted. She crawled over to it, her heart starting to pound with a new, wild rhythm. She ran her fingers over the metal. It was rough, flaky. Maybe, just maybe. Her thoughts spun. She needed a tool, something to pry with. Her eyes fell to her own reflection in a silver water pitcher. And she saw it. Tucked into the intricate braids of her hair was a single, long, ornate pin made of hardened steel. A gift from her mother, years ago. With trembling fingers, she pulled it free. It was thin, but strong. She looked from the pin to the rusted hinge. A crazy, impossible plan began to form. They thought she was a fragile flower, a quiet little mouse. They had locked her in a cage. But they had forgotten one thing. Even a mouse will chew through the bars if its life depends on it. And hers did. More than her life, her destiny.
Hours bled into a timeless gray. Her fingers were raw, her muscles screaming, but she didn't stop. The pin was a clumsy tool, but with every heartbeat, she scraped and pried at the rusted screws of the hinge. The sound of metal on metal was a tiny, secret rebellion in the crushing silence. Finally, with a groan of tortured metal, the last screw gave way. The hinge was free. Her breath caught. She carefully pulled the small door inward, creating a gap just barely wide enough to squeeze through. Freedom. Or at least a chance at it. As if pulled by a string, she wriggled through the opening, the rough wood snagging her dress. She emerged into a long, torchlit corridor. Empty. The air smelled of stone and old dust. Her pulse raced. Now what? She didn't know the layout of the keep, but she had seen a kind-faced elder at the ceremony, a woman with wise, gentle eyes. Lyra, she thought her name was. The elders held great power. If she could just reach one of them, tell her story, she had to try. Because of that, she chose a direction and began to run, her bare feet silent on the cold stone floors. The keep was a labyrinth. Corridors twisted and turned. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. She felt like a real mouse now, scurrying through the den of a great wolf. She flattened herself into an alcove as a pair of guards passed, their heavy footfalls echoing like hammer blows. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure they could hear it. Eventually, she found a set of grander hallways, the walls lined with tapestries. This had to be the way to the council chambers, to the elders' quarters. Hope surged, hot and sharp. But then, two figures stepped out from across corridor, blocking her path. Her blood ran cold. She recognized their armor. They weren't Valor guards. They were from her own pack. Kaelwyn guards. Well, well, one of them said, his eyes cold and devoid of pity. Look what we have here. The little shadow, out of her room. Lord Kaelwyn's orders were clear. The other added, his voice flat. His youngest daughter has been overcome by the shock of the ceremony. She is unwell. She is not to be disturbed. I'm not unwell, Nimira cried, her voice raw. My sister, she's lying. She locked me in. You have to help me. They just stared at her, their faces impassive. In that moment, she understood. Thalira hadn't just stolen her place. She had stolen her voice, her sanity, painting her as a madwoman to their own people. As they stepped toward her, her fragile hope shattered into a million pieces.
Thwack. The sound of wood hitting a practice dummy echoed across the training grounds. Crack. He swung the heavy staff again, the muscles in his back and shoulders coiling and releasing. He was fighting. But his opponent wasn't the straw-filled dummy in front of him. It was the storm of doubt and fury inside his own mind. If you keep that up, there won't be anything left of him, Kyle said, leaning against a weapons rack. Raiden ignored him, spinning and delivering a vicious strike that tore the dummy's arm clean off. His breath came in harsh pants. The physical exertion was the only thing keeping his wolf from clawing its way out. "Talk to me, Ryden," Cale pressed, his voice softer now. "Ever since the claiming, you're on edge." Ryden finally stopped, resting the staff on his shoulders. "Something's wrong, Cale. The elders will come around." "It's not the elders," he growled, turning to face his friend. "It's the bond. It feels unhollow, empty." Kyle frowned, his brow furrowed in thought. "Maybe it just takes time? A fated bond is a powerful thing. Maybe it's not supposed to be easy at first. Maybe you just need to get to know her." Ryden wanted to scream. "I can't get to know her because she's not her." But how could he say that? How could he explain that he, the great Alpha Ryden Vaylor, had claimed a woman in front of his entire pack, only to suspect seconds later that she was an imposter? He would sound insane. Unfit to lead. That's why he had to be careful. "I tried," he said, his voice tight. "At breakfast. I asked her about her garden. She looked at me like I was speaking another language." She was probably nervous, Cale reasoned, ever the pragmatist. "No," Ryden said, shaking his head. The word was a stone in his gut. It wasn't nerves. It was ignorance. He slammed the staff into the ground, the wood vibrating from the force. His instincts, the ones that had never once failed him in battle or in judgment, were screaming at him. And for the first time in his life, he had no idea what to do. What's worse? A small, insidious voice in the back of his mind whispered, "What if the mistake wasn't hers? What if it was yours?" He found her in the Luna's Solar, a beautiful room with woven tapestries and a balcony overlooking the valley. She was examining a silver music box, acting for all the world as if she belonged there. His patience had run out. The time for games was over. He strode into the room, the air crackling with his barely contained fury. She looked up, a perfect picture of surprise. "Alpha," she said, her voice soft. "Stop," he commanded. The single word was sharp enough to cut. "Stop pretending. I'm going to ask you one more time. Why does the bond between us feel like nothing? Why, when I look at you, does my wolf not recognize you?" She didn't flinch. He expected denial, fear, maybe even tears. Instead, her expression softened into one of pity. It was so unexpected it threw him off balance. She took a step toward him. "Ryden," she said, using his name for the first time. It sounded wrong coming from her lips. "Your power, it's like a tidal wave. It's magnificent, but it is also terrifying. Perhaps I am just trying not to drown." Her words were a smokescreen, and he knew it. "That's not an answer, isn't it?" She looked at him, her eyes filled with a carefully crafted sympathy. "I have heard the stories whispered in my pack. Sad stories. About your father, about his mate, about how a difficult bond can cause an alpha to build walls around his heart to protect himself." The air was punched from his lungs. It was a low blow, a masterstroke of manipulation. She took another step, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "What if the bond feels empty? Because you are not letting it in? What if the emptiness you feel is your own fear, so powerful that it's smothering the connection before it can even form?" As the silence roared, her words echoed in his mind. Could she be right? Was his own past trauma, his father's miserable legacy, so deeply ingrained in him that he was the one breaking the bond? Was he so terrified of being deceived that he was rejecting a true mate? The doubt was a poison, seeping into his certainty, turning his righteous fury into a confusing, sickening knot of self-blame. Her world tilted, and he felt his own begin to spin. She had taken his greatest strength, his instinct, and turned it into a weapon against him.
They threw her back into the room. The hatch was rebarred, this time with a heavy iron clasp. A guard was now posted outside the main door. She was more of a prisoner than ever before. For a long time, she just lay on the floor, the cold stone leaching the warmth from her body. Hope was a fragile, stupid thing and hers was dead. But then she felt it. Through the bond. It was a wave of pure, agonizing confusion rolling off of him. His certainty was gone. His anger was gone. In its place was a terrible, churning self-doubt. She could feel his pain as if it were her own, a twisting in her gut. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that Thalira had done this. Her sister hadn't just lied to his face. She had lied to his soul. She had made him believe that he was the one who was broken. Her despair didn't just fade. It burned away. And in its place, something new and hard and cold began to form. Resolve. She sat up, wiping the tears from her face with the back of her hand. Thalira thought she had won. Her own guards thought she was a madwoman. Ryden thought he was losing his mind. They were all wrong. She was not a victim. She was not a shadow. And she was not broken. She was the true mate of the Valar Alpha. And she was going to get him back. She looked around the room again, not with the eyes of a prisoner, but with the eyes of a wolf studying its trap. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. It had... Resolve was a cold, hard stone in her stomach, and it was better than the emptiness of despair. Nymeria sat on the floor of her prison, not as a victim, but as a general planning a war with no soldiers and no weapons. Her mind, once a storm of fear, was now unnaturally calm. Her goal was no longer to escape, but to communicate. To send a message that could cut through her sister's web of lies. But how? A letter would be found. A shout would be ignored. She needed a weapon that was uniquely hers, and then she remembered. Old lessons from the pack herbalist, a woman who taught her that some plants held more than just healing properties. Some held secrets. She thought of whisperleaf, a humble, silver-leafed plant that was often overlooked. The old herbalist had told her a story once about how ancient mated pairs, separated by war, would use the leaf to send their scents to one another. Because of that, it was known as the lover's post. The leaf had a unique ability. If crushed with a more potent flower, it would absorb and hold that flower's scent for days, releasing it slowly on the air. It was a crazy plan. A desperate, fragile hope. But it was hers. So, when the food hatch scraped open and a young, timid servant girl slid a tray inside, Nymeria was ready. The girl, Elara, was the same one who had looked at her with pity in the hall. "Wait," Nymeria whispered, her voice urgent. Elara froze, her eyes wide with fear. "I can't talk to you, they said—" "I know what they said," Nymeria interrupted, keeping her voice low and steady. "But they are wrong. My sister is lying, and the Alpha is in danger because of it." She held up the single perfect moon petal she had saved, along with a crushed, silvery leaf she'd found growing between the flagstones near her window. The whisper leaf. "I don't need you to speak for me. I just need you to deliver something, please. You are the only one I can trust." The girl's face was a mask of terror. "If they find out, your sister—" "She will do worse if her lies are allowed to fester," Nymeria insisted, her gaze intense. "This is not just about me. It's about the health of the Valar pack. An alpha bonded to a lie is a weakness. You know that." As the silence stretched, Elara's fear battled with her loyalty. Nymeria could see the war in her eyes. Maybe it was fate that this one girl was the only person who had shown her kindness. Finally, with a trembling hand, Elara took the small, scented bundle. "Where?" she whispered. "His study," Nymeria instructed. "Leave it where he will find it, a place he will not expect. Please." The hatch scraped shut, leaving Nymeria in the darkness once more. But this time, it was the darkness of a hunter in a blind, waiting for her prey to walk into the trap. Her part was done. Now, all she could do was wait.
He was trying. By the goddess, he was trying. He walked the stone battlements of the keep with the woman he was supposed to call his mate, a cold, formal distance between them. The wind was sharp, and it carried the scent of coming snow. He was trying to follow her suggestion, to open his heart, to push past the doubt. So he had to try and make this work, because the alternative was unthinkable. "The view is magnificent," she said, her voice smooth as polished marble. "I will enjoy ruling from here." Her words grated on him. Ruling, not living, not building a home. Ruling. His wolf, which had been sullen and silent for a day, let out a low, disgusted snort in the back of his mind. He pointed towards the valley. "The river is running high this season. It's good for the farmlands. The pack will have a strong winter harvest." He was testing her, seeing if she would ask about the pack, the people, their well-being. Instead, she wrinkled her nose slightly. "Farming. How quaint." His jaw tightened. He stopped, turning to face her. "That quaint farming feeds over 500 wolves, most of whom are not high-born. It is the lifeblood of this pack." She seemed to realize her mistake. "Of course," she said quickly, her recovery flawless. "I only meant, it's a relief that the Alpha has such things so well in hand, so his Luna can focus on more political matters." Truth be told, every word she spoke was like a grain of sand in a raw wound. There was no connection, no shared instinct. He felt like he was talking to a foreign diplomat, not the other half of his soul. As if the world narrowed to just the two of them, he saw with chilling clarity that she was a stranger. A beautiful, calculating stranger. The doubt she had planted in him yesterday began to wither, and in its place, the cold, hard certainty of his own instinct began to rise again. She was a lie. A walking, talking, breathing lie. But a lie he still had no way to prove. Yet, he sat in his study, a stack of patrol reports ignored on his desk. His mind was a battlefield. Her words from yesterday versus his own gut. The emptiness you feel is your own fear. What if she was right? What if he was so broken he couldn't accept his own mate? The thought was a torment. Then a soft knock. A young servant girl entered, her eyes downcast, carrying a basket of fresh linens. Ilara. He vaguely recognized her. She curtsied, her movements jerky and nervous. "Forgive me, Alpha, for your private chambers." She moved past his desk, and as she did, she stumbled. The basket tilted, and a single, folded piece of linen tumbled out, landing silently on the floor near his chair. "Oh, my apologies, Alpha," she squeaked, her face flushing red. She quickly gathered the rest of her things and practically fled the room, leaving the small, forgotten cloth behind. He stared at it, his brows furrowed. Strange. He bent down to pick it up, intending to call her back, but as his fingers brushed the fabric, a scent hit him. It was faint at first, green, earthy. A plant he didn't immediately recognize. Whisper leaf, an old, rare herb. But then, a second scent bloomed from the first. A scent that slammed into him with the force of a physical blow. Moon petals. His breath caught. The world tilted. It was the scent from his premonition. The scent of peace, of home. The scent of the quiet girl in the back of the hall. The scent of his true mate. Without thinking, he crushed the cloth in his fist. The fragrance exploded, a pure, undeniable truth that filled the room, chasing away every shadow of doubt. His wolf, silent for so long, rose up and let out a triumphant, savage roar in his soul. Her! It is her! He wasn't crazy. He wasn't broken. He had been played. The confusion, the self-blame, it all burned away, leaving behind a fury so cold and so absolute it was terrifying. His goal, which had been so muddled, was now crystal clear. He wasn't just going to expose a lie, he was going to find his mate, and he was going to tear down anyone who stood in his way. The hunt wasn't on anymore, the war had just begun.
She waited. The waiting was its own form of torture. Every passing minute felt like an hour. Every distant footstep in the hall was a potential discovery, a potential failure. She paced the small room, a caged animal, her hands clenched at her sides. She felt the bond, a thin, frayed thread. It was still murky with his confusion, his pain, her message. Maybe it hadn't worked. Maybe the girl had gotten scared and thrown it away. Maybe he'd found it and hadn't understood. To make things worse, her own hope began to curdle back into despair. But then something happened. In the span of a breath, the bond erupted. It wasn't a gentle connection anymore. It was a violent, explosive surge of pure, undiluted emotion. His confusion vanished, incinerated in a blast of absolute certainty. The pain was gone, replaced by a wave of possessive, protective fury so powerful it made her gasp. Her world tilted, and she had to grip the wall to stay standing. It was rage. A terrifying, beautiful rage. A rage that felt like a promise. She didn't know if he was angry at her or for her. It didn't matter. Her message had been received. The sleeping alpha wolf was awake now, and he was on the hunt. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. Her sister thought she had caged a mouse. She was about to find out she had instead unleashed a dragon.
He had to move carefully. She was clever, this imposter. A direct accusation with no proof would only make him look unhinged. She would twist it, use it against him. He needed evidence. He needed to know how. That's why he found himself in the lowest levels of the keep, in the dusty herb-scented chambers of the pack's lore-keeper, an ancient she-wolf named Morwen. Her face was a roadmap of wrinkles, and her eyes, though clouded with age, saw more than most. "Alpha," she greeted, her voice a dry rustle of leaves. "It is rare to see you in my dusty corner of the world." "Morwen," he said, with a respectful nod. "I have a question about historical rituals." He kept his tone casual, academic. He asked her about the old ways, about the magic that existed before the packs were fully formed, and then he laid his trap. "I was reading an old text that mentioned scent masking, rituals used by spies or assassins to fool a wolf's senses. Are they just stories?" Morwen's eyes narrowed slightly. "They are not stories, Alpha. They are dangerous, forbidden magic. Very few remember them." "What did they use?" he pressed. "Many things," she rasped. "But the most potent was a cocktail of herbs. Wolfsbane to deaden the senses, night hemlock to create a false scent, and whisper leaf to carry the illusion." The words hit him like stones. Whisper leaf, the very herb from the message. "What would be the effect on a new bond?" he asked, his voice tight. Morwen looked at him, her gaze piercing. "On a new mate bond? It would be a catastrophe. It would not break the bond, no. That is sacred, but it would shroud it. The Alpha would feel a hollow echo where a symphony should be, confusion, emptiness. He might even be driven to doubt his own mind, his own wolf." The description was so perfect, so chillingly accurate, that all the air left his lungs. He had his proof. As he walked out of the chambers, the truth was a cold, hard weapon in his hand. He knew how she was doing it, and now he just had to figure out why, and where his true mate was being held. He saw her that evening at the council dinner, and she saw him. The moment their eyes locked across the long table, he saw the shift in her. She was a master of control, but he was an alpha, and he was looking for it now. He saw the flicker of unease, the subtle tightening of her jaw. He had changed. She could feel it. The confused, withdrawn male from yesterday was gone. In his place was the alpha, watchful, silent, predatory. He wasn't looking at her like a mate anymore. He was looking at her like prey, and it terrified her. She knew, in that instant, that her time was running out. His doubts were no longer a weapon she could use. They were hardening into a certainty that would destroy her. So, she did the only thing a cornered predator could do. She escalated. Halfway through the meal, she stood, commanding the attention of the entire council and all the elders. Her voice was strong, filled with a false, noble sincerity. "Elders, members of the council," she began. I know the Alpha's choice was a surprise to many, and I can feel that this uncertainty has cast a shadow over our pack. She looked at Ryden, her eyes pleading, a flawless performance. The bond between an Alpha and his Luna is the heart of the pack. To leave it in this state of quiet confusion is a danger to us all. Then came the killing blow. That is why I have asked the High Priestess to prepare the final binding ritual for the next full moon. She paused for effect. It is time to make our bond absolute, to silence all doubt, and for me to formally take my place as your Luna. A murmur of approval went through the elders. It was a brilliant move, a public trap. She was using their own traditions, their own desire for stability, to force his hand. To refuse the ritual now would be a public admission that the bond was flawed, making him look weak and flawed. He met her gaze from across the table. Her eyes were triumphant. A challenge. Your move, Alpha. The full moon was in 2 nights. The clock was now ticking. Her challenge hung in the air, a declaration of war disguised as a plea for unity. Your move, Alpha. And in that moment, as he looked at the imposter playing the part of a lifetime, his fury became something else. It became a weapon. Cold, sharp, and patient. His goal was no longer just to win. It was to give her the grand stage she so desperately craved, and let her hang herself on it. So, he smiled. A slow, deliberate smile that did not reach his eyes. An excellent idea, he announced, his voice booming with false warmth, silencing the murmurs of the council. A binding ritual is exactly what this pack needs, to show our strength, our unity. He raised his goblet to her. To my mate, may our bond be absolute. Thalira's relief was a flicker in her eyes, a micro-expression of triumph that only he could see. She thought she had won. He would let her believe it. Because of that, his own performance had to be perfect. Later that night, he met with the High Priestess in the chilled, sacred air of the ritual chamber. Lyra was even older than Morwen, her face so wrinkled it looked like a dried apple, but her eyes were sharp and missed nothing. You have agreed to the binding, she stated, her voice a low hum. I have, Ryden confirmed. And I want it done by the old ways, the very old ways, for the sake of purity. He let the words hang in the air. The priestess raised a white eyebrow. How old? I want the basin of truth, he said, his voice flat. As the silence stretched, he saw a flicker of surprise, then understanding, in her ancient eyes. The basin was a relic, a large silver bowl that was filled with blessed moon water. Most saw it as a pretty decoration, a forgotten piece of tradition. But the lore stated that when a true fated pair touched the water, it would glow with the light of the goddess. More importantly, it was said to boil and turn black at the touch of a lie. That tradition has not been observed in centuries, Alpha, she said carefully. It is unpredictable. This pack was built on tradition, he countered, his gaze hard as flint. On the sacred truth of the mate bond. I will see that truth honored, priestess, in full view of the pack. She stared at him for a long moment, the air thick with unspoken questions. Then, she gave a slow, deliberate nod. As the Alpha commands, so it shall be. As he walked away, he felt the first real flicker of hope. He had set his trap. Now he just had to pray his true mate could hold on long enough for him to spring it.
The news came like a physical blow. The servant girl, Alara, delivered her meager dinner, her hands trembling so badly the tray rattled. Her face was pale with terror. What is it? Nymera asked, her own heart beginning to hammer against her ribs. The ritual, Alara whispered, not daring to look at her. The binding ritual. Your sister? She announced it at the council dinner. The Alpha agreed. It's in 2 days, at the full moon. The words slammed into her, stealing the air from her lungs. The binding ritual. A ceremony so sacred, so magically absolute, that once it was done, the bond would be permanent. unbreakable, even if it was a lie. Her blood ran cold. The Alpha had agreed? The rage she had felt from him through the bond, had it faded? Had her sister's manipulation actually worked? Her thoughts spun. Maybe his plan, whatever it was, had failed. Maybe he felt trapped, forced into a corner by the elders and the council. Deep down she knew the truth. She couldn't rely on him to fix this. Not when he didn't even know she was real. She had to act. Now. "I need your help, Alara," she said, her voice a low, urgent whisper. Her despair was burning away, leaving a core of desperate, reckless resolve. "I can't," the girl whimpered. "They'll kill me." "They will kill the pack's soul if this ritual is allowed to happen," Nymera insisted, grabbing the girl's arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "I don't need you to fight. I just need you to get me things. Things from the gardener's shed. Flint, steel, a flask of lantern oil." Alara's eyes widened in horror. "What are you going to do?" Nymera looked towards the high, narrow window, towards the distant, dark shape of the greenhouses. A place she had loved, a place she had built, a sanctuary. And she knew what she had to do. She had to create a diversion so big, so chaotic, that it would throw the entire keep into disarray. A fire. "Sometimes," Nymera said, her voice trembling but hard as steel, "you have to burn down the beautiful things to save what truly matters." The night of the full moon was cold and clear. The stars were brilliant chips of ice in a black sky, and Nymera was ready. Alara had done her part, leaving a small cloth-wrapped bundle with her dinner tray. Now, it was up to her. She waited until the guards changed shifts, a moment of brief inattention she had been observing for 2 days. In that moment, she worked quickly. She used a strip of her own dress as a wick, soaked it in the oil, and jammed it into the lock of her prison door. It was a desperate, insane plan. She struck the flint against the steel. Once, twice. A spark caught. The oil-soaked rag ignited with a whoosh. Smoke, thick and acrid, began to billow. Her goal wasn't to burn the door down. It was to create panic. An emergency. Seconds later, a muffled shout came from the corridor. "Fire! Fire in the West Wing!" Alarms began to sound, their jarring clang echoing through the stone halls. The chaos she had prayed for erupted. She heard the guards outside her door yelling, their attention no longer on her, but on the smoke pouring from her lock. As if fate demanded it, their focus on the fire gave her the chance she needed. She ran to the other side of the room, using the heavy water pitcher to smash the high, narrow window. It was a desperate act of rebellion, one that sent shards of glass raining down. Cold night air rushed in. She didn't hesitate. She scrambled up, cutting her hands on the glass, and squeezed through the narrow opening. She dropped to the stone ledge outside, her heart a frantic bird in her chest. Her real plan wasn't the fire on the door. It was the fire she was about to start. She ran along the ledge, a shadow against the stone, until she could drop into the darkness of the castle gardens. The real gardens, her sanctuary. And she ran, not away from the keep, but towards the greenhouses, the precious, flammable bundle clutched in her hand. Her own heart was breaking with what she was about to do, but with every step she took, the false bond pulsed with her sister's triumphant energy, and it fueled her resolve.
"The basin is in place," Kyle said, his voice a low rumble. They stood in Ryden's private armory, the air thick with the smell of polished steel and leather. Ryden was strapping on his ceremonial vambraces, his movements sharp and precise. "The priestess is ready. The entire pack is gathering in the great hall." "Good," Ryden said, his jaw tight. He was a coiled spring, every muscle, every nerve, pulled taut. He was walking into a trap, but it was one he had set for his own enemy. "This is a hell of a risk, Ryden," Kale said, his face grim. "If this basin of truth doesn't work—" "It will work," Ryden cut him off. He had to believe that. It was the only card he had left to play. But then, the deep, resonant clang of the emergency alarms shattered the quiet. The sound was a violation, a scream of distress that echoed through the very stones of the keep. Without thinking, they both bolted from the room. Guards were running through the halls, their voices shouting reports. "What is it?" Ryden roared, grabbing the arm of a passing captain. "Fire, Alpha!" the man yelled over the din. "In the greenhouses!" The greenhouses. The words hit Ryden like a physical blow. Of all the places, why there? It wasn't a strategic target. It wasn't near any important chambers. It was a place of peace, a place of life. As the truth unraveled in his mind, he knew, with a gut-deep certainty, this was no accident. The imposter wouldn't do this. She had no connection to that place, which meant... His heart skipped. The scented message, the moon petals, the garden. She was doing this. His true mate. She was fighting back. Before the words left his lips, he was moving. "Kale, secure the perimeter. No one gets in or out. I'll handle the fire," he commanded, his voice pure alpha, cutting through the chaos. As he raced towards the smoke, a new, terrible urgency seized him. His trap was set in the great hall, but the real fight, he now realized, was happening out here in the darkness.
The heat was a living thing, a roaring beast that licked at her back. Nemera ran, her lungs burning from the smoke and the exertion. Behind her, the greenhouses were an inferno, the glass panes exploding, the flames reaching for the moon like greedy orange fingers. The sight was a knife in her heart, but she couldn't stop. The chaos was her only shield. While the forest held its breath, she raced through the familiar paths of the outer gardens, her destination clear, the main gate. Freedom. A chance to find allies, to tell the truth, to stop the ritual. She could hear shouts behind her, the sounds of the pack fighting the blaze. No one was looking for her. No one even knew she was gone. She was a ghost, and the fire was her final desperate act of haunting. The massive iron gate was just ahead, silhouetted against the fiery glow. So close. But then, a figure moved out of the shadows, blocking her path. It was a wolf of a man, broad and powerful, his face grim in the flickering firelight. She recognized him instantly. The beta. The alpha's second. Her heart plummeted. "Going somewhere?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous growl. She didn't answer. Her body moved on instinct. She dodged to the side, trying to slip past him, but he was impossibly fast. He grabbed her arm, his grip like a steel manacle. "I don't think so," he said, his eyes narrowed. "You have some explaining to do, arsonist." "No," she cried, struggling against his hold. "You don't understand. You have to listen to me." She was so close, to be caught now, by him. It was a cruel, crushing defeat.
The fire was under control. His wolves had moved with the ruthless efficiency he had trained into them, forming a water brigade from the river. But his mind wasn't on the flames. It was racing, putting the pieces together. The fire was a diversion, a desperate, brilliant diversion, which meant she was trying to escape. Just as the thought hit him, Kale's voice came, sharp and urgent, through the mind link they shared. "Alpha, we have a problem. We caught the arsonist at the main gate. You need to see this." Ryden didn't hesitate. He broke into a dead run, his long legs eating up the ground. He burst through the smoke-filled gardens and saw him. Kale, his back to him, holding someone who was struggling fiercely. "What is it?" Ryden demanded, his voice a harsh bark. Kale turned, and the breath was stolen from Ryden's lungs. The woman Kale held was stained with soot and dirt, her simple dress torn, her hair wild around her face. Her hands were cut and bleeding, but her eyes were blazing with a defiant fire that matched the inferno behind her. And her face, it was the exact same face as the woman waiting for him in the great hall. The scent hit him then, cutting through the smoke. Moon petals, her scent, raw and real and undeniable. Between them, something cracked. The final piece of the insane puzzle slammed into place. The two sisters, the shadow and the star, the lie in his castle and the truth in his arms. It was a deception so audacious, so profound, that he could only stare. Cale was confused. Alpha, she looks just like your mate. Ryden's gaze was locked on the fierce, desperate eyes of the woman who had set her own sanctuary on fire. The woman his soul had screamed for. He finally understood the full, terrifying scope of the betrayal. And before he could speak, his world, which had been tilting for days, finally shattered completely. His world had shattered into two identical faces. The truth was right there, held in his beta's arms, soot-stained, defiant, and real. His true mate. And the lie was waiting for him in the great hall. His mind was a maelstrom, 1,000 plans of attack forming and dying in the space of a breath. He had to get her safe. He had to expose the imposter. He had to... But then, a new figure swept into the chaotic fire-lit garden. And just like that, his world shattered again. It was Thalira. She moved with the grace of a striking viper, her silver ritual gown somehow untouched by the surrounding chaos. Her eyes, wide and seemingly full of horror, landed on the scene. First on the burning greenhouses, then on him, and finally, on Nemera. Her performance was a masterpiece. A gasp, a hand flying to her mouth, tears instantly welling in her eyes. "Nemera!" she cried, her voice breaking with practiced sorrow. "Oh, sister, what have you done?" She rushed forward, not to Nemera but to him. She grabbed his arm, pressing herself against his side as if for protection. It was a brilliant, possessive move that staked her claim in front of everyone. "Alpha, I'm so sorry," she choked out, loud enough for Cale and the gathering guards to hear. "I didn't want to believe it. She's been unwell. Ever since you chose me, she couldn't accept it. The jealousy, it must have driven her mad." The lie was so audacious, so complete, it was almost impressive. She was using Nemera's desperate act of rebellion as the final, damning piece of evidence in the story she'd been writing all along. He could feel the tide of opinion turning. The guards looked from the composed, weeping Luna clinging to their alpha, to the wild, struggling girl who had just set a fire. Who would you believe? His plan to use the basin of truth felt like a distant, foolish dream. She had seized control of the narrative. To defend Nemera now in this public spectacle would make him look like a co-conspirator. Or worse, a fool. He was trapped.
Her sister's voice cut through the haze of her capture, and Nemera's blood ran cold. She watched, horrified, as Thalira wove her poison into the air, twisting her desperate fight for freedom into an act of pathetic, jealous madness. Every word was a nail being hammered into her coffin. "That's not true," she screamed, struggling against the beta's unyielding grip. "She's the one who's lying. Tell them, Alpha. You felt it. You know the truth." Her voice sounded shrill, hysterical, desperate, mad. The exact opposite of her sister's tragic, dignified sorrow. The moment their eyes locked, she saw the cold, triumphant gleam in Thalira's gaze. She had won. She looked at the Alpha, at Ryden. He was staring at her, his face a mask of stone, his golden eyes a vortex of unreadable emotions. But he didn't speak. He didn't defend her. He didn't deny the lie. And in the quiet that followed, her heart didn't just break. It turned to dust. He had seen the truth, seen her, and it hadn't been enough. She had fought. She had burned down her own sanctuary. And for what? To be paraded as a madwoman in front of the man whose soul was tied to hers. To make things worse, she saw the pity and suspicion on the faces of the guards. They believed the lie. Everyone believed the lie. Without another word, Thalira gave a subtle nod. "Take my poor sister somewhere she can calm down," she said, her voice dripping with false compassion. "She is a danger to herself." As the guards moved in, Nemera's fight drained away, replaced by a cold, crushing wave of defeat. Her desperate gamble had failed, spectacularly. She had tried to rise from the shadows, and all she had done was give her sister a bigger stage to extinguish her light completely. The room was not a guest chamber. It was a cell. Cold stone walls, a single barred window high above, and a thin cot. The scent of despair clung to the air like a shroud. This was where her rebellion had led her, from a gilded cage to a stone one. Hours later, the heavy door creaked open. It was Thalira, alone. The mask of the grieving sister was gone, replaced by a look of cold, absolute power. "Quite the mess you've made, little shadow," she said, her voice a low purr. She began to pace the small cell, her silver gown whispering against the filthy stone floor. A fire, so dramatic, so you. Nymera just stared at her from the cot, her heart a numb, aching void. "He knows," she whispered. "I felt it. He knows you're a lie." Thalira laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Oh, he suspects. His wolf is probably screaming your name. But what does that matter?" She stopped, leaning down until her face was inches from Nymera's. "He has no proof, and a suspicion is not a weapon, but I have a confession." "I will never confess to your lies," Nymera said, a spark of defiance still flickering within her. "Oh, I think you will," Thalira said softly. "You see, you made a mistake. You trusted someone, that little servant girl, Ilara." Nymera's blood turned to ice. "What did you do?" "Nothing. Yet," Thalira said, straightening up. "But she was your accomplice, wasn't she? In your madness, in this arson." She let the words hang in the air. Treason is such an ugly charge, and it's a shame when it has to be applied to an entire family. Her parents, her little brothers, they will all be implicated, ruined, exiled, if they're lucky. The threat was a physical blow, knocking the last bit of air from Nymera's lungs. Her empathy, her conscience. Thalira was using it as a noose and tightening it around her neck. "You wouldn't," Nymera breathed, her voice cracking. "Wouldn't I?" Thalira's smile was a razor's edge. She placed a roll of parchment and a quill on the small, rickety table. "Here is the choice, sister. You will write a full confession. You will state that you acted alone, driven by jealousy and madness. You will renounce any claim to the Alpha and accept immediate, permanent exile." She paused, letting the weight of the ultimatum sink in. "You do that, and the girl and her family will never be mentioned again. You refuse, and their blood is on your hands." In that moment, she was faced with an impossible choice. Her own soul, her own destiny, versus the lives of an innocent family. And looking into her sister's merciless eyes, she knew it wasn't a bluff.
He was a caged animal. After Thalira had Nymera dragged away, the elders and council had descended on him, a flock of panicked birds. They had cornered him in his study, their voices a drone of concerned advice and veiled warnings. "Your mate is clearly distraught, Alpha. This public display could be seen as instability. Perhaps it is best to proceed with the ritual quickly, to solidify things, to present a united front." He knew what was happening. Thalira was using them as her shield, her wall. She was using their own laws and traditions to keep him from his true mate. Every attempt he made to go to Nymera was blocked with a polite, firm reminder of protocol. "Let her rest, Alpha. She is being tended to." He felt the bond, a thin, fraying cord. It was pulsing with a terror so profound it made his teeth ache. She was in danger. She was terrified, and he couldn't get to her. Because of that, his power, which had always felt absolute, now felt like a useless weight. He was the Alpha. He could command armies and move mountains, but he couldn't get through a single door to the one person in the universe who mattered. His frustration boiled over into a helpless rage. He was pacing the length of his study, the patrol reports and maps a bitter mockery of his authority. He had all this power, all this strength, and it meant nothing. He had failed to protect her the moment she was revealed. He had let the imposter take control. The guilt was a physical sickness, a poison in his veins, The promise he had made to himself, to not repeat his father's mistakes, was crumbling to dust around him.
The quill was heavy in her hand. The parchment was a blank, screaming void. For what felt like a lifetime, she just sat there, the weight of an innocent family's future pressing down on her. Her soul answered the silent question. She couldn't do it. She couldn't sacrifice them. Her own happiness, her own destiny, could not be bought with their suffering. With a hand that trembled so badly she could barely form the letters, she began to write. Each word was a betrayal of herself, a surrender of her soul. I, Nymera Kelwyn, confess, driven by a jealous madness. I renounce my claim. I accept exile. The ink was the color of her own blood. The words were the sound of her spirit breaking. When she was done, she signed her name, the final damning stroke. It was over. She had lost. As the guards came to collect the parchment and escort her from the keep, she felt nothing. A hollow, aching emptiness. They didn't even shackle her, they didn't need to. She was already a prisoner of her own sacrifice. As they led her through a dark, secret passage towards the outer walls, towards her exile, she allowed herself one last, fleeting connection through the bond. She sent him not a cry for help, not a warning, but a single silent feeling. Goodbye.
The horn sounded, deep, resonant. A call to the great hall, a call to the binding ritual, a call to his own personal hell. The sound was a death knell. He stood in his study, dressed in the ceremonial black robes of his office. He felt like a man walking to his own execution. He had tried everything. He had demanded to see the prisoner, but was told she was already being escorted into exile, as per her own written request. Then, Cale entered. His face was a grim, unreadable mask. He didn't speak. He just held out a roll of parchment. Nymera's confession. Ryden took it, his hands numb. He unrolled it. He saw her elegant, familiar script. He read the lies, the self-condemnation, the surrender. It was a perfect, unbreakable trap. He had no proof. His only witness had confessed and vanished. And the entire pack was waiting for him to bind himself to a monster. His father's fate, the one he had sworn he would never suffer, was not just knocking at his door. It was here. It had won. He stared at the confession, at her signature. This was his lowest point. The moment where his power meant nothing, his instincts were rendered useless, and his hope was a dead thing in his chest. He was utterly, completely alone. The horn sounded again, more insistent this time. It was time. Without a word, he let the parchment fall from his fingers. He turned and walked towards the great hall, towards the lie on the altar, his heart a cold, heavy stone. The all was lost, and he could do nothing but walk into the darkness. Defeat was a cold, heavy cloak. Ryden walked the long, torchlit corridor toward the great hall, each step a nail in the coffin of his own happiness. The false confession was a brand on his soul. The horns called out again, a mournful sound that echoed his own despair. He was walking to his doom, to repeat his father's tragic history, and there was nothing he could do. His wolf was silent, a beaten thing in the cage of his ribs. It was over. He passed a high, arched window that overlooked a lower enclosed courtyard. He barely glanced at it, but then, a flicker of movement. He stopped. His body froze before his mind could catch up. Down below, 2 Kelwyn guards were escorting a small, cloaked figure across the stones. An exile. Her. His breath caught. Her head was bowed, her form slumped in utter defeat. This was his last sight of her. The woman his soul had chosen, being thrown away like refuse. An unbearable agony ripped through him. He was about to turn away, unable to watch the final moment. But then, as if she'd heard his soul cry out, she stopped. She looked up, straight up, directly at him. The distance between them collapsed. The stone and glass and night air vanished. The moment their eyes locked, the bond didn't just flicker. It erupted. It was a physical, violent jolt, a supernova of shared truth that slammed through the walls of his despair. He saw no madness in her eyes. He saw a sacrifice. He saw a devastating, soul-deep love. He saw a woman who had given up everything to protect others. And in that instant, he knew. The confession was a lie. The exile was a lie. Her surrender was the bravest act he had ever witnessed. The cold, heavy cloak of his defeat was incinerated. The beaten wolf in his chest rose, no longer silent but roaring with a fury so pure, so absolute, it shook the very foundations of his soul. His despair was gone, burned away by a righteous, avenging fire.
Emptiness. That was all that was left. She walked, a ghost in a coarse cloak, flanked by guards who looked at her with contempt. Each step took her further from him, further from the life that had been hers for a single glorious moment. She had sent her silent goodbye through the bond, a final, painful severing. She expected nothing back. But as if pulled by a string, some instinct made her stop. It made her look up, and she saw him. A dark silhouette in a high window, an alpha walking to his doom. Her heart, which she thought had turned to dust, gave a single, painful lurch. And then the bond, which she had tried to silence, roared back to life. It was not a whisper this time. It was a thunderclap. It was a golden, screaming wave of his energy crashing into her. She felt his shock, his realization, his agony. And then, something else. The despair was gone. The confusion was gone. In its place was a rage so powerful, so possessive, so utterly focused on her, that it stole her breath. It wasn't the rage of an alpha who felt betrayed. It was the rage of a wolf whose mate was being threatened. It was a silent, impossible promise screamed across a courtyard. I see you. I know the truth. Don't you dare give up. The guards shoved her forward. Keep moving. But it was too late. The spark had found the kindling. Her hope, which she thought was dead and buried, was now a raging inferno. Without warning, a new, ferocious strength flooded her veins. Her surrender was over. The fight was not. She now had a new goal, one that eclipsed all others.
He turned from the window a completely different man. The despair was gone. In its place was a terrifying clarity. He was no longer a victim of this plot. He was the alpha, and it was time he started acting like it. He saw Cale waiting for him at the grand entrance to the great hall, his face a grim mask of resignation. Raiden, it's time. The plan has changed, Raiden said, his voice a low, dangerous growl that made his beta's eyes widen. What are you talking about? There is no other plan. Raiden grabbed Cale's arm, his grip like iron, and pulled him into a shadowed alcove. He didn't have time for subtlety. He didn't have time for doubt. He needed his brother. The woman waiting at that altar, he said, his golden eyes blazing, is not my mate. She is an imposter. Her name is Thalira Calewyn. Cale stared at him, utterly dumbfounded. Raiden, that's insane. Her sister, Nymera, is my true mate, he continued, his voice relentless. The one they just dragged into exile, the one who signed that confession. Thalira is using forbidden scent-masking herbs to fool everyone. She has her sister held prisoner, and she forced that confession out of her. He leaned in closer. I am staking my life, my rule, and my very soul on this truth, Kyle. Now, I have to ask you one question. Are you with me? As the silence stretched, Kyle searched his alpha's face. He saw no madness. He saw absolute, unwavering conviction. He saw the alpha he had followed his entire life. And he made his choice. What do we do? Kyle asked, his own voice now a low growl. We let the ceremony proceed, Raiden said, a grim smile touching his lips. I laid a trap. The basin of truth. I'm going to let her walk right into it. Your job is to seal the hall. When I give the signal, no one gets in or out. And you make sure the Calewyn guards can't get to either sister. Can you do that? Consider it done, Cale vowed. And for the first time in days, Raiden didn't feel alone.
The postern gate was just ahead, the gateway to her exile, the end of her story. The two Kaelwyn guards were relaxed now, their prisoner a broken, compliant shell. They were wrong. The shell was broken, but what was inside was now pure fire. Her mind raced, formulating a desperate, suicidal plan. She couldn't fight them. They were warriors, but she was small, and they thought she was weak. She could use that. Her new goal was to create a moment, a single, heartbeat-long moment of distraction. "Please," she whimpered, letting her knees buckle. "I feel faint." It was a classic, flimsy trick, but they bought it. Because of that, they believed she was a fragile, hysterical female. The first guard grunted in annoyance. "Get up. We're almost there." "Just a moment of water," she gasped, collapsing further, forcing him to grab her arm to hold her up. That was the moment. The instant his grip was compromised, she moved. Her body moved on instinct. She wasn't a fighter, but she was a survivor. She stomped down, hard, on his instep with her heel. He roared in pain, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was all she needed. She shoved him with all her might, sending him stumbling into his partner. The two men tangled for a single, clumsy second, and she ran. Not for the gate, not for freedom. She turned and ran back into the stone guts of the keep, back towards the heart of the danger, back towards the sound of the deep ceremonial chanting that was just beginning to echo from the great hall. She heard them shout behind her, their footsteps heavy and furious. A desperate, terrified chase had begun. Her lungs burned, her legs ached, but she didn't care. She was no longer running from her exile. She was running towards her destiny.
He walked into the great hall and a hush fell. Every eye was on him. He felt like an actor stepping onto a stage for the final, tragic act. He walked the long aisle, his gaze fixed on the altar. Thalira stood there, a vision in silver, her face a perfect mask of bridal joy. A lie. The high priestess stood before the basin of truth, the moon water within it glowing with a soft, internal light. A test. He took his place opposite Thalira, taking her hands in his. They were cold as ice. The bond screamed in protest, a silent, violent rejection. He ignored it, his face a carefully constructed mask of solemn devotion. He could feel her smug triumph, her belief that she had truly, finally won. She had no idea what was coming. "We gather under the gaze of the goddess," the priestess began, her voice echoing in the cavernous hall, "to perform the sacred binding, to join two souls, fated and chosen as one, for now and for all time." He let her speak the old words, each one a hammer blow against his soul. He played his part, his eyes locked on the impostor's face. He was drawing the net tighter. Buying time. He sent a silent prayer to the goddess. Let her make it. Let her be safe. Let her get here. He could feel Kale and his most loyal guards moving into position at the doors, their movements subtle, unnoticed in the drama of the ceremony. The trap was set. The priestess raised her hands. "It is time. Let the fated pair approach the basin of truth and let the goddess herself bear witness to this union." Thalira's smile was radiant. This was her moment of absolute victory. She took a step toward the basin, ready to seal her claim forever. But then, from the back of the hall, a commotion, a shout, the crash of a heavy door being thrown open, and then, a single desperate voice screamed his name. "Raiden!" The tension broke. Every head in the hall turned. Thalira froze, her face a mask of pure horror. And Raiden smiled, a true smile this time, a predator's smile. She had made it. His mate was here, and the real show was about to begin.
Her scream of his name tore through the silence of the great hall. And just like that, every eye was on her, a sea of shocked, disbelieving faces. She stood at the entrance, a ghost at the feast, her dress torn, her body bruised, her lungs heaving. Behind her, she could hear the Kaelwyn guards shouting, closing in. But she wasn't looking at them. She was looking at him. Raiden. And he was smiling. a fierce, predatory smile that was meant only for her. It was a promise, a signal. In that moment, she knew she hadn't been fighting alone. "Seize her!" Thalira's voice was a high-pitched shriek of pure panic. The mask of the serene bride had shattered, revealing the monster beneath. "She's insane! Don't let her near the altar!" The Kaelwyn guards lunged for her. But before they could reach her, a new wall of bodies blocked their path. The Beta, Kael, and 3 massive Valar guards stepped in front of her, their faces like stone. Then the Alpha's voice boomed, a wave of pure command that shook the very rafters. "Let her pass." The hall fell silent once more. The Kaelwyn guards froze, unwilling to defy a direct command from the Alpha. As if in a dream, Nymeria walked forward, down the long aisle, past the stunned faces of the elders, past her sister's murderous glare. She walked until she stood on the other side of Riden, at the foot of the altar. The 3 of them. A truth, a lie, and the wolf who had to choose between them.
Her scream was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. It was the sound of his mate, of a warrior who had refused to be broken. The sight of her, so fierce and defiant, sent a wave of pure, possessive pride through him. He watched Thalira's composure shatter, and his smile widened. The trap was sprung. "What is the meaning of this?" Elder Goran demanded, his voice trembling with outrage. "Alpha, your ceremony is ruined." "On the contrary, Elder," Riden said, his voice dangerously calm. He never took his eyes off the 2 sisters. "The ceremony is just beginning." He turned to Thalira, his voice dropping to an icy whisper. "You wanted to solidify our bond, to prove its strength to the pack. Now is your chance." He gestured to the glowing basin of truth. "You first." Thalira's face went pale. "This is madness. She is the one on trial here, not me." "Then prove it," he challenged, his voice ringing with power. "Prove your claim. Touch the basin. Show them all the truth of our fated bond." Her eyes darted around, looking for an escape. But there was none. Kyle and his guards had sealed the hall. The entire pack was watching, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning suspicion. With a trembling hand, trapped by her own ambition, she reached out and dipped her fingers into the glowing moon water. For a second, nothing happened. But then a hiss. The water around her fingers began to bubble as if boiling. It turned a murky, sickening black. A collective gasp of horror swept through the hall. The light in the basin died, leaving only the foul, dark water. Thalira snatched her hand back as if burned, a strangled cry escaping her lips. The proof was absolute, undeniable. Riden then turned to Nymeria, his mate. She looked exhausted, terrified, but so incredibly brave. He offered her his hand. "Nymeria," he said, his voice now soft, filled with all the longing and apology in his soul. When her name left his lips, it felt like the first true thing he had said all day. She placed her trembling, cut-up hand in his. The moment their skin touched, a jolt of pure electric energy shot between them. The bond, so long shrouded and muted, roared to life, a symphony in their souls. Together they reached toward the basin. The second their joined hands touched the blackened water, it erupted. A pillar of brilliant silver light shot towards the ceiling, so bright it forced everyone to look away. It was not a gentle glow. It was a raw, untamed explosion of fated, primal magic. It was the goddess herself shouting her truth for all the world to see. The light faded, leaving them in a stunned, breathless silence. The water in the basin was now clear as crystal, with a soft, gentle light pulsing from its depths. The truth was revealed. Thalira stood frozen, her face a mask of utter ruin. Riden didn't even look at her. His entire world had narrowed to the woman standing beside him, her hand still in his. He gave a single, sharp nod to his beta. "Kael, take her, and take the Kaelwyn guards who helped her. Put them in the cells." Without a word, Kyle and his men moved in, apprehending the disgraced, sobbing Thalira, who didn't even put up a fight. It was over. But Ryden ignored the drama. He ignored the shocked whispers of his pack, the horrified looks on the elders' faces. None of it mattered. He turned to Nemera, gently taking her other hand, his thumbs tracing the cuts on her knuckles. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Her eyes, full of unshed tears, finally met his. "Only my pride," she whispered, a watery smile touching her lips. In the quiet that followed, surrounded by the chaos of their own making, they finally had their first real moment. "She forced you to write the confession," he stated. It wasn't a question. Nemera nodded, her throat tight. "She threatened the servant girl, Elara, and her family. I had no choice." "You sacrificed yourself for them," he breathed, a wave of awe washing over him. Her quiet nature wasn't a weakness. It was a profound, selfless strength. "Nemera, I am so sorry. I should have known. I should have trusted my wolf from the very beginning." "You did trust him," she said softly. "You just needed to hear him roar." He gently touched her face, his callous thumb wiping away a smudge of soot from her cheek. The space between them burned, not with confusion, but with a deep, aching tenderness. She was real. She was here. She was his. And he was hers.
The silver light of the basin was a balm on her wounded soul. It was a validation, a homecoming. It was the truth made manifest. Watching her sister be led away, she felt not triumph, but a deep, hollow sadness for what could have been. But then, he turned to her, and the sadness washed away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of belonging. The world outside of him, the shocked faces and the whispers, it all faded into a blur. There was only Ryden. His gentle touch on her cut hands was more intimate than any kiss. His apology, his regret. It was everything she needed to hear. When he looked at her, she knew he wasn't just seeing the Luna the goddess had chosen for him. He was seeing her, the gardener, the shadow, the survivor. "I was so scared," she admitted, her voice trembling as the adrenaline finally began to fade, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. "I know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Never again. I swear on my life, Nemera, no one will ever harm you again." Before the words left her lips, he leaned in and gently, so gently, pressed his forehead against hers. It was a gesture of pure reverence, a promise. In the echo of his voice, she felt the last of her fear dissolve. The fight was over. She was safe. She was home. 2 months later, the wind was crisp with the promise of winter, but Nemera felt nothing but warmth. She stood on the high stone balcony of the Alpha's Keep, Ryden's balcony, looking out over the valley. It was the same view he had stared at in torment, but for her, it was a landscape of peace. "The grain stores from the southern farms are full, Luna," Kale said, standing beside her. He no longer looked at her with confusion, but with a deep, unwavering respect. "But the northern families are worried about the early snows. They fear their harvest will be cut short." Nemera didn't look at him. Her gaze was fixed on the distant, snow-dusted mountains. "My grandmother used to say that fear makes for a cold winter, but preparation makes for a warm one," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "Send a quarter of the southern surplus north, not as a gift, but as a trade to be repaid with timber in the spring. It will show support without showing weakness." Kale smiled. A real, genuine smile. "An excellent plan, Luna. I'll see it done." As he left, a familiar pair of strong arms wrapped around her from behind. A familiar scent of pine and winter filled her senses. Ryden. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his warmth seeping into her back. "Solving my problems for me, are you?" he murmured into her hair. "Our problems," she corrected softly, leaning back against his solid chest. She turned her head, her lips brushing his cheek. "And I wasn't solving it. I was just helping our family."
He held her, looking out at the land that was theirs. His land, his pack, his mate. the gnawing emptiness that had haunted him for years, the fear of repeating his father's mistakes, was gone. In its place was a profound, steady peace. He had watched her over the past 2 months, watched her win over the pack not with grand speeches or displays of power, but with her quiet wisdom, her deep empathy, and her unshakable grace. She was the heart the pack hadn't known it was missing. She was the perfect balance to his warrior's soul. She was so much stronger than Thalira had ever been. Eventually, the truth of Thalira's plots had come out. Her alliance with a rival pack, her secret study of forbidden magic. Her exile was a mercy she hadn't deserved. But that was a closed chapter, a ghost of the past. "The council is finally eating out of your hand, you know," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Even Goran. I saw him asking for your opinion on a trade dispute yesterday." Namera just smiled. "I didn't offer an opinion. I just asked him what he thought the fairest solution was. Sometimes people just need to be heard." He tightened his arms around her, breathing in her scent of moon petals and home. The bond between them was no longer a chaotic storm or a confusing whisper. It was a calm, deep river, a constant source of strength and love that ran through both of their souls. In the stillness that followed, no grand declarations were needed. The fight was over. The lies were silenced. The shadows had fled. There was only this: a quiet balcony, a shared future, and a bond that had been tested by the cruelest of fires, only to emerge stronger, brighter, and truer than ever before. Her soul answered his, a perfect, silent harmony. And it was enough. It was everything.